Okay, I'd like to invite on stage Leonardo Donatacci, co-founder of Solana Italy, Wolfgang Vitale, General Manager at Bitcoin Swiss, and Chi Yang, CEO and co-founder of Quantum Custody. So welcome to the panel, Beyond Custody, the evolution of digital asset infrastructure in the post-quantum era. So custody has become one of the foundations of institutional digital asset adoption, but the market is evolving quickly. So with growing regulatory clarity, more mature infrastructure, and the need to prepare for quantum-resistant security, the question is no longer how to safeguard assets today, but what the next generation of custody and digital asset infrastructure will look like. So now let's start with the market perspective. Custody used to be seen mainly as a secure storage, but today, what are institutions really asking for when they choose a custody provider? Security, regulation, access, or a mix of all of these features?
Thanks. Look, I think the question can be debated from all aspects, but I actually looked this up just recently. EY had a report for 2026, and surprise, surprise, top of the list, it was regulation. And when we talk about regulation, it's not just regulatory compliance, it's regulatory clarity. In the EU, we obviously have MiCA. In the US, there's the Genius Act that has been passed, and the Clarity Act is coming. And essentially it says it in its title, the Clarity Act. We need regulatory clarity, and that is top of mind for institutions. When you think about the motivations of institutions, they have to operate with regulatory bodies and comply with the law. And this is something that has been here in the crypto space since day dot, the question of regulation. And since we've had more regulatory clarity, we are seeing that influx of institutions, but they've only dipped their toes in the water. Inherently within regulation is risk management, and that's top of mind for institutions these days, and part of that is security. Quantum is one of the major risks that is apparent within digital assets, but there is an urgency there. So those are the top things that institutions are thinking of at the moment, and let's see how the space evolves in that regard.
Thank you, Chi. Now let's move to the crypto sphere more in detail. Wolfgang, from the perspective of a crypto infrastructure and protocol expert, how has custody market changed over the last few years? Are we moving from basic safekeeping toward a broader institutional infrastructure layer?
Yeah, I think there is space for everybody still. So you can still be super specialized on custody, or you can offer a more diversified set of services that, custody is not just like having some private key safe, It can be also implementing some more complex policies, like maybe some client wants to have some more complex way to decide how to have access to the funds, how to control the funds, having, like multiple approvals and certain guardrails on how to move the funds, how to deploy them on DeFi. Yeah, there are many options, and of course, the market participants need to find a way to diversify. And post-quantum readiness is definitely for one way to, to show that you are on top of things and you're not fucking up, as Fabrizio said. Yes, you have to show that you're on top of things and you prepare with the migration in advance. You're aware of the challenges, but also you do the right steps in advance. And the first will be definitely to know at least what is the surface of attack in your organization. So have a clear inventory of where do you use cryptography, what are the dependencies dependencies on vendors and so on. So really have a clear scope of the surface of attack and then start taking measures, at least the ones that you can take. Yeah, if you talk specifically about crypto, then of course you cannot start the migration to a post-quantum protocol if the chain itself doesn't have a way to become post-quantum. But for sure you have to keep monitoring the space and take action as soon as possible when it makes sense. So yeah, I would say it's not just custody. You want to offer all sorts of services related to the control of funds, like staking, of course, and deployment in DeFi and other protocols, lending, and so on. There is space to diversify. That's what I want to say. But I don't know if there was some other more specific question or.
Thank you. Leonardo, when we introduce the post-quantum dimension, how does the definition of secure custody change? Is quantum resistant mainly about cryptography, or does it also require new thinking around governance, key rotation, recovery, and long-term asset protection?
Thank you so much. So I think for the first time in the history, we have kind of a change in how we think about digital assets in general. And I think the most important thing is everybody thinks, for example, about migration, and definitely they're very, very important. But the most interesting thing about all these post-quantum and breaking Schnorr and whatever is more about getting for the first time a time access on a digital asset. Because before it was always, if I protect an asset, that asset, if the cryptography is sound, then that asset is pretty much good. Now it's more about, if we know that this algorithm will be breaking, it's how much do we want to reveal about the information that we think that it's safe right now? And so having for the first time the concept of you need to not think in the future and say, I need to migrate to a post-quantum secure signature, but even right now it's saying, what are the type of data and what are the type of asset where if I reveal too much right now can actually be harvested and then decrypted later. I think this is something that a lot of people are not thinking about, a new dimension of digital asset. Naturally, when the migration comes, I think one of the most important thing would be to actually figure out how to swap components as well. So not be super into a singular, for example, signature, but at the same time, to actually understand and figure out something that could scale in the time and could change easily once we figure out that, okay, this is a possibility. Let's figure out how the future looks like.
Thank you. Now, institutional custody is also an operational business. What are the hardest parts to scale in practice? So, compliance workflows, client onboarding, or segregation of duties, or even something else?
When we think of the idea of scaling, we always think of it from a technological perspective. I've spent a majority of my career in audit and compliance at Ernst & Young. And I've seen how organizations work. And in my mind, when we talk about scaling, it's an organizational problem. It's a human problem. When you think about implementing a new technology, and particularly to combat against the quantum risk, firstly, it's complicated. And when you think about it from an organizational perspective, you have to educate the organization. Leaders are there to obviously understand the problem, but there is a whole organization under those leaders. We have various departments when it comes to audit and compliance. You have your audit committees, you have your legal departments, you have risk management, you have accounting and finance. And when you think about a large organization, they need to coordinate with each other. There's always office politics and approvals and egos. So when you think about implementing a new technology, Presumably, we would like to upgrade to protect against quantum in a calm environment, but as we understand, Q-Day is coming at an uncertain date, and it is complex. And when you think about it from an organizational perspective, it's going to take a lot of time. When you look at an organization upgrading a process workflow and understanding the risks around that workflow, traditional controls take time to upgrade. I've seen in the listed environment organizations taking up to 3 years to upgrade significant workflows, or even just understanding their workflows. So when you add on a technological workflow on top of that, and we're probably seeing it with artificial intelligence, everyone's moving at rapid pace to keep up. But when you think about the application of AI, you have to think about the human element. Do you have a good workflow from the beginning, or are you just slapping AI on to accelerate a shitty workflow? So in my mind, when I think about scaling from an organizational perspective, it's very much organizational and the human element.
Thank you, Chi. I think the key word here is coordination. So, Wolfgang, protocols and custody providers do not involve in isolation. How should custodians, exchanges, and blockchain communities coordinate when preparing for quantum-resistant upgrades?
Custodian, exchanges, and protocols. How do they coordinate?
Infrastructure providers and blockchain communities.
Well, I think a lot of the conversation is open. Anyone is open can contribute to give recommendations or participate in a discussion with the protocol upgrades. So if there is any good idea or way to influence upgrades in Bitcoin, Ethereum, or other chains, if there are some recommendations or some insights that can come from custodians and crypto infrastructure providers, like saying, maybe you didn't think about this, maybe you should consider also how this affects us, you can participate in the conversation. I don't think that everybody needs to coordinate at the same point. I think that over time, the good solutions and good explanations to these solutions will be clear, and there will be ways to do a post-quantum upgrade, and everybody will normally, converge towards the right solution without having a need to coordinate on how to do it. What is needed is maybe timelines and, give clear urgency, because, I think you mentioned it in a good scenario. This is like Y2K, but Y2K, at least we had a day. And we had a date, and everybody knew they had to be ready by that time. So if there is some sort of coordination needed, for me, it's more like on clarifying the urgency and make it very, very clear that we need to do something. We need to do the upgrade with years in advance. But it's tough, because different institutions have different needs. And we talked about harvest now, decrypt later. So, it's true that some secrets are harvested now, and they will be decrypted later. But it's also true that not all secrets have the same lifetime, So, maybe some secrets can be revealed in 10 years, and maybe you don't care. So it depends on the institution, also the level of urgency that is needed from that respect. So, yeah, I would say coordination will be on recognizing the problem. I think that, maybe I'm too optimistic, but I think that we are there. At least, institutions know that it's a real problem. We don't have many quantum deniers yet. And if they are, the world is moving, the world is upgrading. And yes, not many institutions started the initiative, but it's also true that, 60% of the human-initiated traffic measured by Cloudflare is post-quantum ready. So at least for what regards post-quantum encryption, the world started moving, and for signature certificates, we will get there. But yeah, to conclude, the conversation is open and coordination is possible. I just don't think that we need someone from above to say that's the way, or even an outcome from a coordination to say this is the way. I expect the market and the good solutions to propagate and spread naturally. So really, the important thing is the urgency and the priority. That's what I would focus on. Yeah. Thanks.
So, looking ahead, Leonardo, what should institutions expect from post-quantum digital asset infrastructure? Will we see a gradual upgrade of existing systems or more a fundamental redesign of how custody signatures and trust model work?
So I think it's a mix of both, in the sense of like, I think quantum will be more of like a forcing ends for a lot of these institutions. And the way that we actually will be able to pretty much try to solve at scale for institutional the problem of quantum could be more about like a disciplinary, we could say, approach. That is like, the first one is like visibility naturally, because it's so funny how like most institutions don't know what data they have, where they have the data, and most important is like what data is encrypted, how. And so we were talking about this with Chi before, and it's like, imagine an hospital, like they're still very, very behind on all the data that they have and like how they custody that data. So first of all, it's like, let's make an inventory and figure out what we need to migrate. Second of all, as I said before as well, it's more about agility, and in the sense of like not being blocked by specific implementation. But at the same time, is to figure out and scale it up and like try to be open-minded about like what the best solution for quantum is for digital asset after. And last and for all is more about time awareness, and I really enjoy the idea of like we shouldn't be quantum ready today, but we should start preparing with like the parts where it's easy actually to be quantum ready right now. And the parts where make, for example, products and other stuff slower, worse, probably it's better to just like wait, start naturally developing ideas around that, but like be very, very sure when the time is right to just turn it on and have everything tested and just like be prepared for not when Q-Day happens, because it will be already too late, but when the percentage, for example, reach 1%, 2%. And I think that will probably be a safe way to just like migrate everything at that point to something post-quantum.
Thank you. Now, before we close, one flash question for all of you, as I did in the last panel. In the post-quantum era, what will be the most important feature of digital asset infrastructure? Maximum 3 words without explanation.
I've got one word: agility.
Okay. That's my word. Oh. Well, confirmation. Yeah, cryptographic agility. Yeah.
Prepared.
Thank you all for the discussion and for the different perspectives. Today we explored how custody is evolving from a basic security function into a broader institutional infrastructure layer, and how the post-quantum era may accelerate that transformation. Thank you everyone, and now let's enjoy the aperitivo.